This was the worst scene I've ever been to. Before you even went into the residence, you could smell the decomposition.
At a quiet suburban home in Waukesha, Wisconsin, investigators walk into a scene that is straight out of a horror movie.
At the time that I got there, we knew that there were 2 bodies found.
Right away, we were asking questions. Where is their kid? Are they going to find the body? They found 2, and maybe there's a 3rd.
As terrifying as this situation is, this case becomes something so much bigger and darker.
Once you're behind the curtain, it's very difficult to know what's going on back.
A juvenile court filing in Waukesha County lists the defendant's date of birth, his charges, and one small detail buried in the margins. At the time of his arraignment, he had not yet turned 18. That detail is the whole story. A child, by every legal definition that protects children, planned to kill a president. And before that, he killed the 2 people who raised him, and then lived beside their bodies for over 2 weeks. Picture this: a suburban home in winter, curtains drawn, candles burning low near 2 bodies wrapped in blankets, while upstairs, in the same house, a teenager does his homework, walks the dog, and answers text messages from his stepfather's boss. That image is the entire case. Everything else is just the investigation catching up to it. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The call that started it all came from a grandmother.
The start of this was really that there was a call that came in, and so that started the real what happened situation for us.
The call comes from 17-year-old Nikita Cassap's grandma. She's concerned about him, she's worried, she doesn't know where he is.
When Nikita's grandma reported that he wasn't attending school and that he was missing, we also received a report from the Waukesha School District on the same time. And so that's when we started kind of looking into what was going on.
Nikita's grandma also tells police that she has this strange feeling about her son, Donald Mayer. This is Nikita's stepdad. Apparently, he wasn't feeling well.
Donald has been texting her. She thinks he's acting a little weird, but there's no alarm. She thinks, okay, he's sick and he's acting kind of strange.
My first involvement was February 28th, 2025. Waukesha County Sheriff's Department called me, and
She hadn't heard from her grandson. The school hadn't seen him either. 2 missing person reports, filed almost simultaneously, converged on one address in Waukesha, Wisconsin, a town where, by every statistic, violent crime is a rarity, not a headline. What deputies found inside wasn't just a crime scene. It was staged chaos. Pictures pulled off walls, closets emptied onto floors, paperwork for a handgun with no handgun in sight.
when they first entered, they thought that this was possibly a burglary. Pictures were off the walls, beds were off the box spring. If you had gone into the closets, all the clothing was off any shelving units. It was laying all over the floor. It definitely looked like someone had gone there and burglarized the residence.
There's also another small study area upstairs where paperwork was pulled out. We did find paperwork for a handgun, but we didn't locate a handgun in the house. So was it something where a suspect located a handgun and then used it on the family? As the night progressed, we determined there was no other victims in the house.
For hours, investigators believed they were looking at a burglary gone catastrophically wrong. It wasn't. It was misdirection, built by someone who had 2.5 weeks to plan it. The bodies belonged to Donald Mayer and Tatiana Cassap, husband and wife, ambushed separately, each covered deliberately with blankets and towels, candles positioned nearby. This wasn't concealment. This was ritual. And the son who should have been the first person police wanted to interview was nowhere in the house. Here's the moral refrain worth remembering, because it will come back twice more before this story ends. He killed them, and he stayed. Investigators traced a missing vehicle first, then a cell phone. Emergency pings placed it moving west, Illinois, then Iowa, then Kansas. A 17-year-old with no license driving across half the country, stopping at tourist attractions along the way like a boy on vacation. What finally stopped him wasn't a manhunt. It was a rolled stop sign in rural Kansas and a license plate that happened to match a stolen vehicle alert entered into the system just hours earlier. Ask yourself, if that patrol car had been a mile behind or that alert filed a day later, would anyone have found him at all?
We knew that there was a vehicle missing from the residence. I mean, it just kept piling on that something's going on here. Something's wrong.
Investigators need to find Nikita. The last time anyone heard from him was February 11th. Now it's the 28th. That's more than 2 weeks later.
And we started kind of figuring out that night that we believed that Nikita had taken down Mayer's vehicle, that he had left with that vehicle. We started pinging, doing emergency pings on Nikita's phone, and we did get some emergency ping information back from Waukesha. We had a ping or a location going south in Illinois. We then had him going west through Iowa, Colorado, Wyoming, I believe down to Kansas.
He went to the world's largest truck stop in Iowa. I thought that was an interesting choice.
The truck stop that Nikita stopped at was on February 24th. It almost was like he was sightseeing.
He's 17 years old and he doesn't have a driver's license. So he's driving across the country without a driver's license.
And then he ended up in Kansas.
What ended up getting him caught was his driving. He didn't stop all the way at a stop sign. Literally, that was the reason for the traffic stop, as he rolled a stop sign.
Inside the car, deputies found a .357 handgun, clothing that smelled of decomposition, birth certificates, family photo albums, jewelry, electronics, and more than $14,000 in cash. And on a camera memory card, photographs, his mother and stepfather's bodies, arranged with what investigators would later describe as an unsettling, almost ceremonial fascination. Audio recordings captured him narrating his stepfather's decomposition in real time from inside the house while he was still living there. He killed them, and he stayed. That's the second time. Remember it, because the reason behind it is where this case stops being a simple double homicide and becomes something far more calculated. For over 2 weeks, the teenager maintained an elaborate deception.
I believe that he was mostly staying in the basement of the house. It looked like there's like a TV room kind of thing where he had a couch and blankets, and I think he was trying to avoid being on that main level where both his mom and Donald were.
As police piece together what exactly happened during these last 2.5 weeks, all signs are now pointing to Nikita as the perpetrator of these murders.
I believe he murdered Dawn first, and then he waited for Tatiana to come home. I mean, she was still wearing her winter coat. She just had gotten in the door. I think it was pretty apparent that he had a plan, and he enacted his plan to murder his parents.
He truly executed his parents. He ambushed them, he shot Dawn in the back of the head, and he shot his mom, I believe, at one point through her throat. He leaves her where she falls, and he leaves Donald where he falls, and then just covers them up with some blankets and lives with them. And what's even freakier to me is that he's calling himself into school. He is pretending to be Donald to his work. He's pretending to be Donald to his mom, who is his grandma. He's covering his tracks, and he's acting normal.
Nikita went grocery shopping. He went and bought fast food. He went to Culver's. He walked the dog. He took out the trash. He shoveled the driveway. He did all the kind of normal things that someone would do while living, but with his dead parents in the house.
He impersonated his stepfather in text messages to his employer, citing implausible illnesses that never matched, conjunctivitis one day, a lost voice the next. He called himself in sick to school. He grocery shopped, ordered fast food, walked the family dog, and shoveled the driveway. Neighbors saw nothing unusual because there was nothing to see. He wasn't hiding a crime. He was performing normalcy over the top of one. But investigators soon discovered the deception wasn't just about buying time to avoid detection. It was about buying time to search. envelopes of cash, jewelry behind picture frames, anything of value the house could offer. Because leaving required resources, and resources required searching every room in a home he now shared only with the dead. Then came the part of the case that transformed it from a tragic domestic homicide into a federal matter. Digital forensics on his devices revealed a pattern of engagement with extremist ideology online, anti-government rhetoric, violent content, and communication on encrypted platforms with individuals investigators believe were affiliated with hate-driven extremist networks. According to law enforcement statements, the teenager had developed a plan to use a weaponized drone in an attempt to assassinate the President of the United States, believing the act would trigger a societal collapse he could then help rebuild in the image of his radicalized worldview. Records show the FBI's involvement wasn't new. 2 years earlier, in 2023, his own mother had contacted the Bureau, concerned about his online activity. That investigation concluded with no charges filed. There simply wasn't enough. Not yet.
As it turns out, this story becomes a puzzle that is not what investigators expected at all. When they dig deeper into Nikita's cell phones and computers, they discover he's not just reading about the dark underworld on the web, he's actually participating in it.
Nikita had some very concerning web activity and phone activity. It appeared he had a fascination with anti-government and other kind of far extreme political viewpoints.
We know he was talking on the app Telegram. Nikita went onto this app looking for these people. He went looking for neo-Nazis. He went looking for extremists.
These hate groups, they will actually target people very specifically because they want them to go out and do things. And the real problem is, because they can do it through this internet process and through apps and platforms, they're very difficult to stop. And so that's what makes them so dangerous.
My understanding is that Nikita had similar political views to some of these other individuals who are committing terror attacks. And so when he saw these people out taking action, he was almost inspired by them to harm people himself in the name of his political belief.
We didn't even know how deep is this? How real is this? How big of a plot is this? Is he working with other people? Is this a terrorist situation? And it just randomly got uncovered when he killed his parents.
That's when police call in the FBI. Turns out, though, this isn't new. The FBI had actually investigated Nikita Cassap 2 years earlier.
Back in 2023, Nikita's mom actually called the Bureau, and the FBI showed up to do an investigation, decided that it was nothing of consequence and moved on. But there was that concern of his being online, being in contact with some of these more extremist organizations.
At the time, there wasn't enough to charge.
He killed them, and he stayed. Third and final time. Because staying wasn't hesitation. It was preparation. Every day inside that house with his parents' remains was a day spent readying an escape plan investigators now believe was engineered specifically to fund an act of political violence, and afterward to disappear into Eastern Europe under his mother's and his own birth certificates. He was extradited back to Wisconsin and charged with 10 counts, headlined by 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, each carrying a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment, along with hiding a corpse and theft. Bail was set at $1 million. According to the criminal complaint, prosecutors described the case as circumstantial but overwhelming. No video of the killings themselves, but a chain of digital evidence, forensic timelines, and physical evidence that left, in the state's own words, the puzzle pieces fit together. Nearly a year later, as his trial approached, the defendant entered a plea of guilty to both homicide counts, a decision that surprised even the courtroom that had spent months preparing for trial.
Good morning, everybody. The matter is here today for a change of plea hearing. I was advised that it was the intent of Mr. Cassap to enter pleas of guilty or no contest to counts 1 and 2.
And we're all like, what what do you have to gain? Like, what are you doing? Why are you changing your plea? You could take it to trial and just see.
Tell me if this is true. It says, I give up my right to a trial. True?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's take a look at the charge against you, sir, or charges, I should say. Count number 1 in the information alleges that on or about February 11, 2025, you did cause the death of victim A, who's identified as Donald Mayer, with intent to kill that person. What is your plea to count 1, sir?
Guilty, Your Honor.
What I saw was a very robotic response when he was pleading guilty in this case. Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. You could see his chair literally shaking. You could see that his knees must have just been shaking underneath the counsel table as he was trying to get this over with.
Count number 2 says on the same date and location, February 11, 2025, at the address, you did cause the death of victim B, who's identified as Tatiana Cassap, with intent to kill that person. What is your plea to that charge, sir?
Guilty, Your Honor.
All right. Did you commit these offenses?
Yes, Your Honor.
People want to know is why not take this to trial? Why did you plead it out?
Actually, for us, our main goal was to have him accept responsibility for the 2 deaths in this matter. In consulting with the family, they were in agreement that this is a fair offer. I think it gives us a time period that we want for incarceration, so there's really no reason to put the family through a trial.
Are you in any way surprised about Mr. Cassap's decision to plead guilty?
I guess I'm a little surprised. I mean, there's really no downside for him to take it to trial. But again, I think the courts look at the fact that someone takes responsibility for what they did, and I think that's a factor that they consider at sentencing.
Pleading guilty to the 2 counts of intentional homicide also gives Nikita one distinct advantage. The state agrees to dismiss the other counts. So while there's no question that he is going to get 2 life sentences, the question of parole is still in play.
I think his best chance of possibly getting a sentence in which he would be back in the community at some point was to accept responsibility, enter the plea, and hope that the judge makes that decision.
All right, I'll call the matter State of Wisconsin versus Nikita Cassap.
Court records show the plea agreement dismissed the remaining 8 charges in exchange for guaranteed convictions on the 2 most serious counts, with the question of parole eligibility left entirely to the sentencing judge's discretion. At sentencing, victim impact statements described a family shattered twice, once by the killings and again by the public unraveling of a plot connected to them. Prosecutors argued for the maximum, life without any possibility of extended supervision, citing what they called a total disregard for human life and a continuing danger to the community. The defense countered with arguments rooted in adolescent psychology, citing the defendant's age, his isolation as an immigrant teenager with few social ties, and his documented cooperation with federal investigators in the weeks following his arrest, during which he voluntarily provided information to help identify the extremist network he'd been communicating with. In his own statement to the court, the defendant apologized directly to his extended family, describing his mother as someone who had cared for him unconditionally, and stating that he had become consumed by what he called hateful thoughts, believing his actions were justified as part of a larger ideological conflict. He told the court he could not blame propaganda or the people who radicalized him because the choice, ultimately, had been his.
Before the judge officially sentences
I see tears like this, especially when you have young people. I think they're real. I mean, people want things to be logical. People want to believe that there's good on one side and there's evil and they don't bleed together. And yet you see a boy who's crying about the death of his mother that was caused by his own hands. Some things truly are irreconcilable.
There is no excuse for what I did. The truth is I became obsessed with hateful thoughts and feelings. I felt like the world was a sick, evil place, and that my extreme actions to try to change it were justified. I thought I was part of a revolution, part of a war. And I told myself, the bad things have to happen in war. I could not blame the videos, propaganda, and people that inspired my actions, because I had the ability to choose right instead of wrong. I am very sorry for what I have done.
I'm not immune to the fact that I have a very young man here, and that whatever decision I make.
The judge's ruling was unambiguous. 2 life sentences, both without the possibility of extended supervision, meaning barring a future legal reversal, this defendant will die in custody. In his ruling, the judge noted the calculated, premeditated nature of the crime and stated he could not determine, given the acts committed, whether meaningful rehabilitation was something the court could ever reasonably expect. What remains isn't a mystery of who. The record on that is closed. What remains is the far harder question of how a documented, loving household produced this outcome, and what role a screen, an algorithm, and an anonymous stranger somewhere overseas played in engineering it. The criminal complaint in State of Wisconsin v. Cassap is public record, filed in Waukesha County Circuit Court, and it's worth reading in full if you want to understand exactly how investigators built this case piece by piece. Here's the question we want answered in the comments. At what point does online radicalization stop being a mitigating factor in sentencing and start being an aggravating one? If this case affected you the way it affected our research team, hit like, share this with someone who needs to see it, subscribe to the Crime Infinity, and turn on notifications, because the next case we follow will ask you to look just as closely.